Hello again, welcome back. Here we are to continue, our discussion of JavaScript, asynchronous JavaScript, and making a weather API, you know, wrapper, right? We call it a wrapper because it's going to wrap like this code. We're going to wrap it all in a function, right? So right now it's working pretty good. We could take the code that we have here. Anybody could import it into any project, and they could use a single function to go and pull the weather data in, right? Doesn't sound like much, but actually it's really useful, and it's the kind of thing that's actually happening in a lot of npm packages, right? We've just got a function that simplifies the usage of some feature, that might take a lot of code to write or many lines of code, and we've reduced it to just a single function and made it easier to understand, right? This is easier to understand. We're just gonna call get weather, use the standard way to handle a promise, and then we don't have to understand about any of this stuff. We don't have to know what the address is. Then we have some extra options there too that we can set. You don't have to include this in the path here, right, and figure that out. Okay, so let's talk about challenge number. I guess we just did challenge number 4 there, and we did the await keyword, right, and async keyword. Oops. So let's do challenge number 5 now, okay? So challenge number 5 asks, like, hey, what other improvements can you make? So the challenge here really is a little more open-ended. I have a couple ideas, but if you have ideas for improvements, you should put them in here. Come up with your own, improvements, right? I'm going to make a couple suggestions, okay? So first of all, when we look at the JSON object that's returned, it's pretty ugly, okay? So let's actually take a look at it. Like I have, I'm getting the data here, and if I console.log the data, when I test my project here, let's do 90210. It's my favorite zip code these days. You can see I get this this block of JSON right here, and it's okay, but it's kind of confusing, So in other words, like when I'm trying to get the temperature, I have to do data.main.temp. But if I want the description for the weather, I have to do data.weather bracket 0 dot description, right? And so why is that, right? Why is that so complicated, right? Let's take a look at it. So if I look at the object here, the top level object would be data. So that would be object. And then I say dot main. So if I scroll down here, you can see there's main. And then inside of main, it says dot temp. And then you can see temp right there is 60.03. Okay. And then this has a feels like a temp min, temp max, and pressure, and a couple other properties, right? So humidity and pressure, and yeah, right? Okay, so that's where this stuff is. And then if I want to get the weather right here, it says weather bracket 0 dot description. And so if I scroll down here, you can see it says weather. Oh yeah, there it is, weather object. And it turns out weather object is an array. And then inside the array, there's just a single object. And that single object has description, icon, ID, and main, right? Like, so confusing, right? And then, I got main here, but then I got main up here, right? I don't know. I'm confused, right? It's hard to follow, right? And I had to really look through this to figure this out, right? And they put the wind down here, and so I kind of like it where they have some of the things separated, like the COD. The COD is like an error message from the server, so the server works, but maybe their weather reporting is down or something, so they'll give you an error message here, and it won't be an error in fetch, right? So that's like another thing to deal with, right? And they give you the coordinates and the main, right? So that's okay in name, but then this weather with an array and some of the information here feels like it should go with this stuff, right? So what can we do there, right? Can we improve on that? So I think we can, right? So one of the things we could do here is we could rewrite the JSON object that was returned, and we could make it kind of nicer, right? So what if we did that? What if we said, instead of returning JSON here, what if we said like const, weather data equals, square bracket or curly brackets, right? So we'll return an object, and then what we're going to do is we're going to return the weather data. Now the change here is going to break the other code because I'm going to change the data here. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to get data, but remove main and just put temp at the top level and put description at the top level, because I feel like those are so important. I'd just be able, like, it would be just so much easier if people could just say data.temp, data.description, right? And then maybe like some other information we could break up into some lower level properties, or nested properties. But the thing is, generally, like, the more nested we make something, the more it feels like we're organizing things, but also the more confusing it is to follow through and be able to use it. So having fewer nested properties makes things a lot easier to use, okay? The only problem that we run into is when we run into properties that may share a name, right? So, every property at the same level has to have a unique name. So we have to keep that in mind. So let's give it a try. So what I'd like to do is instead of doing temp, let's break it first and then fix it. So I'm not going to make any changes here, but really what I want in the end is have this say data.temp, data.description, right? Okay, so I'm going to add those properties here. So I'm going to say, what is it going to be? Temp. We can spell out temperature too, but I'm going to just do temp. And then the value for this is going to be json.main.temp, right? And we can confirm that by looking at the value here, right? So it should match this one. And the other thing we can do is we can get our weather data. So if I do 94010, the weather doesn't show anything because we've changed the value there. And but if we go to the console, we can see the object here was returned, right? And it has temperature on it. Okay, so that means that over here I should be able to just get temp like this. 94010. Oh, and then I get the temp, right? The description is missing because my object only has this one property on it right now. Okay, so let's fix that, right? So I'm going to put a comma here and say, and I use description spelled out, so I'll spell it out here, and this would be json.weather. This is the confusing one. Bracket 0.description. Was it short or was it long? Oh yeah, it was long description, right? So so let's spell that out, right? So let's do that. Let's see if it works, right? So we'll do, oh yeah, and then if we make this change here, the object we're returning is just going to have these two top level properties. So let's fix this one, right? So now we can just say data.description. That's like a lot nicer. Okay, great. Let's give it a try. So 94122. Oh, there we go. So now we're back in business, right? And maybe we want more properties. So I'm going to leave this up to you. What I want you to do is to console log the property here, the JSON object, right? So I'm going to say console.log, and I'm in the get weather function when I do this, because this is the original object returned from OpenWeatherMap. And what you need to do is you need to examine this to pull off the information that you think is relevant, and then move it here into a property that you think is, much more intuitive for people to use. Okay, so so let's give that a try. So I'll do one of them here, and then you can do the rest on your own. I'm going to do 010. So there we go. We got 34 degrees, overcast clouds. If I open up the base object here, you can see it's got clouds, it's got COD, we should probably keep that COD property. So I'm gonna put that in here. Actually, maybe I'll rename it as code. COD sounds weird, right? I'm gonna say code, and then I'm gonna do JSON.cod. I'm gonna not save this file because as soon as I save it, it'll refresh the browser because I'm running in, in the local server, right? And I want to keep this data here so I can look at it. So I'm gonna do COD. I'll need a comma here. And so that's one of them, right? And even though we're not using it, we can include it. And then you could use this value here on code to check for an error, okay? Let's check. What else should we get? Maybe these coordinates would be good. I like with coordinates that the whole thing is an object with longitude and latitude. So let's keep that. Let's do coordinate equals JSON dot coordinate, comma, right? So I think that that's good. I like this feels like temp and pressure and humidity. Like those sound really useful. So let's put those right after temperature here. So let's do feels like, and we'll do JSON dot main, right? Because this is in the main object here. You can see where this is confusing, right? And then we'll do feels like, comma, and then we'll say temp min is JSON dot main dot temp min, comma, and then we can do temp max also, right? So anyway, this is your goal, okay? Work through here and like explore this thing, open these up, read all the properties there, find the properties that you think are relevant and important, and then you add them here, okay? And some of them you might want to have inside an object, and some of them maybe we want to have at the top level. Think about what's intuitive on both sides. So when you're here, what would be most intuitive for you to grab a property? What would you guess? Like, we don't want people to have to do what we're doing to figure out where the properties are. We want them to be able to kind of intuit and guess where they might be, right? Let me finish this one. So this is JSON.main.temp max, right? And then the other half of the challenge here would be once you've added these properties, maybe also edit your developer code over here and maybe display some of them, right? So you could add some of those properties here and display them. Okay, so anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that that's useful to you, and that would be the solution to challenge number 5, okay?